My driveway was empty. My paid-off Porsche was gone. I dialed 911, trembling, until Aunt Carol called, giggling. She'd given my spare key to Chris because he needed a win. She didn't know I was already tracking him, and I wasn't coming alone. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence of the suburbs usually brought me peace, but tonight, it screamed that something was wrong. I pulled my rental car, a sluggish, gray sedan that smelled faintly of stale coffee, up to the curb of my house. It had been a grueling 2 weeks. My job as a data analyst for a major financial firm required a level of precision that often left my brain feeling like scrambled eggs by Friday. And this particular business trip to Chicago had been a marathon of spreadsheets, client disputes, and sleepless nights. All I wanted, the only thing playing on a loop in my mind for the last 4 hours of my flight, was the sight of my car. My car. It sounds materialistic to say that an object was my primary source of comfort, but it wasn't just a vehicle. It was a Porsche Macan, customized in a deep metallic night blue that looked black until the sun hit it just right. It had taken me 5 years of aggressive saving, skipped vacations, and overtime shifts to afford. I had made the final payment exactly 14 days ago. It was the first tangible proof that I, Jessica, the quiet cousin who everyone said would burn out, had actually made it. I turned the rental car off, grabbed my laptop bag, and looked toward the driveway. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. The driveway was empty. I blinked, actually rubbing my eyes with the back of my hand as if I were in some cliché cartoon, sure that the streetlights were playing tricks on me. I stepped out of the rental, my heels clicking loudly on the pavement, and walked up the driveway. I stood on the concrete slab where my car should have been. There was nothing but a small oil stain from the delivery truck that had dropped off a package weeks ago. "No," I whispered, the word catching in my dry throat. "No, no, no." I spun around, looking up and down the street. Had it been towed, I lived in a quiet HOA community. I hadn't blocked the sidewalk. I hadn't left it on the street. I had parked it right here, locked, alarmed, and safe. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I dropped it on the grass before snatching it back up. I checked my towing app, nothing. I checked my security alerts. My Wi-Fi had been down for 2 days, which I had assumed was just a provider outage. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. Stolen, it had to be stolen. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the ringing in my ears. My car, I gasped, trying to force air into my lungs. I just got home from a business trip. My car is gone. It was in my driveway. Okay, ma'am, can you give me your address? I rattled off the address, my voice rising in pitch. It's a Porsche Macan. Blue, I have the VIN on my phone. Please, you have to send someone. I just paid it off. We have an officer in the area, ma'am. Officer Miller is nearby. Please stay on the line. I paced the length of the driveway, the cool night air doing nothing to settle the heat of my anxiety. I felt violated. Someone had come onto my property, bypassed the security, and taken the one thing I was most proud of. I felt tears pricking my eyes, hot and stinging. It wasn't about the money, though it was a lot of money. It was about the safety I thought I had. I was still on the line with the dispatcher when a second call beeped in. I pulled the phone away from my ear to check the screen, expecting it to be my security company or perhaps a neighbor who had seen something. The name on the screen made me freeze. Aunt Carol. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Aunt Carol never called this late unless someone was dead or she needed money, usually the latter. I ignored it. I had to focus on the police. It rang again immediately, and again. "Ma'am," the dispatcher asked. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "My aunt keeps calling me. It's weird." Officer Miller is pulling up now, the dispatcher said. I looked down the street and saw the patrol car's lights, silent but flashing blue and red, bouncing off the houses. As the cruiser slowed to a stop, my phone buzzed one more time. A text message from Aunt Carol. Pick up the phone, Jessica. Stop panicking. It's not stolen, lol. I stared at the screen, the lol burning into my retinas. The betrayal I felt in that moment was sharper, colder, and infinitely worse than the fear of a stranger taking my car. A stranger takes your PR. Property because they want money. Family takes your property because they think they own you. Officer Miller was a tall man with a buzz cut and a face that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite. He stepped out of his cruiser, adjusting his belt, and walked toward me with a notepad in hand. Ms. Jessica, he asked, his voice gravelly but polite. Yes, I said, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles were white. But, hold on, 1 second. I held up a finger, staring at the text message. It's not stolen. I pressed the call button for Aunt Carol. She picked up on the first ring. Finally, her voice was shrill, loud enough that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She sounded breathless, almost excited. I saw the police cruiser pull up on the doorbell camera. You really are dramatic, aren't you, Jess? I froze. The doorbell camera. Carol, where are you? I'm not at your house, silly, she laughed, a grating, bubbling sound that made my skin crawl. I'm at home, but I still have access to your Ring account from when I cat-sat for you 3 years ago. I saw you pacing around like a headless chicken. Officer Miller was watching me closely, his pen hovering over his notepad. I motioned for him to wait, my chest tightening. Where is my car, Carol? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Oh, don't use that tone with me, she snapped, her mood shifting instantly from amused to defensive. It's safe. Chris has it. My brain short-circuited. Chris took my Porsche. He didn't take it, she corrected me, as if I were a toddler who had used the wrong word. I let him borrow it. He has a big interview tomorrow. Well, it's not exactly an interview, it's a meet and greet with a potential investor for his new business idea. He needed to look the part, Jessica. You know how judgmental people are. Appearance is everything. I looked at the empty driveway, then at Officer Miller, who was now frowning. You gave him my car, I repeated, trying to process the insanity. How? I have the keys. The spare, obviously, she said breezily. When I came over for lunch last month, I saw the spare fob in that little bowl by the entry. I just popped it in my purse. Just for safekeeping. I knew you'd lose it eventually with how scattered you are. She had stolen my key a month ago. She had planned this. Or at least, she had waited for the opportunity. Carol, I said, my voice shaking, not with fear anymore, but with a rage so potent it felt like lava in my veins. That is theft. You entered my home, stole a key, and then stole a $70,000 vehicle. Tell Chris to bring it back. Now. Stop it, she shrieked. He is your cousin. He's been having such a hard time lately. His girlfriend left him. He lost that job at the warehouse. He's depressed, Jessica. He needed a win. He needed to feel like a winner for a few days. He's just going to drive it to the meeting, maybe keep it for a week or two to get his confidence back. You're on business trips all the time. You don't even drive it every day. Why are you so greedy? Greedy, the word hung in the air. I looked at the rental sedan. I looked at the mortgage I paid alone. I looked at the suit I was wearing, wrinkled from 18 hours of travel. Officer, I said, turning to Officer Miller and putting the phone on speaker. I am on the phone with my aunt. She has admitted to stealing my spare key and giving my vehicle to her son. What? Carol's voice squawked from the speaker. I did not steal it. We are family. It's community property. Officer Miller stepped closer, his expression hardening. Ma'am, he said toward the phone, this is Officer Miller. If you have taken the vehicle without the owner's explicit consent, that is grand theft auto. I suggest you return the vehicle immediately. She's lying, Carol screamed. She said he could use it. She's just jealous because Chris is finally going to be successful. He deserves a break. He's starting fresh. I ended the call. I didn't hang up. I just pressed the red button, cutting off her screeching voice. "Do you want to report it stolen, Ms. Jessica?" Officer Miller asked, his pen poised. "If she has the key, it's a bit more complicated, but if you didn't give permission, it's theft." I looked at him. I thought about Chris. I thought about the last time I saw him, at Thanksgiving, when he made fun of my job, calling me a corporate drone, and laughing that I'd be alone forever with my cats and my spreadsheets. "Yes," I said, "report it stolen, but I know where he is." I opened my phone again. I didn't need the towing app. I didn't need the police to search blindly. "They forgot one thing," I muttered to myself, opening a specific app that connected to the dealer-installed tracker, one that wasn't standard, one I had paid extra for because I was paranoid. "What's that?" Officer Miller asked. "My cousin Chris," I said, watching the blue dot on my screen pulse at a location. "'Bout 20 miles away. He's on probation for reckless driving, and Aunt Carol forgot that I'm not just a data analyst. I'm the person who keeps the receipts." A cold smile touched my lips. They thought I was the passive doormat they could walk over. They were about to find out that I was the trapdoor. To understand why my Aunt Carol felt entitled to rob me, you have to understand the mythology of Chris. In our family, Chris was the golden boy. He was the firstborn male, charming, loud, and athletic in high school. He was the one who was going to take over the world. I, on the other hand, was the quiet girl in the corner reading books, the one they ignored unless they needed someone to fix the Wi-Fi or tutor Chris in math so he wouldn't fail the 10th grade. For 29 years, I had watched a pattern repeat itself with exhausting predictability. Chris would screw up, get fired for showing up late, crash a car, get into a bar fight, and Aunt Carol would swoop in to cushion the fall. She would blame the boss, the other driver, or the bartender. She would pay his bail, pay his rent, and demand the rest of the family chip in because Chris is just going through a phase. I had been the target of his bullying more times than I could count. I remembered my 16th birthday. I had saved up from babysitting to buy a used laptop for school. Chris, who was 18 then, had accidentally spilled a full liter of soda on it during my party. He had laughed. "Oops, guess you'll have to get a real computer now." Aunt Carol hadn't offered to replace it. She had just said, "Oh, Jessica, don't cry, it was an accident, he was just playing." That was the dynamic. Chris broke things, I was expected to clean them up. But 5 years ago, I stopped cleaning. I moved out, got my degree, and landed a junior analyst position. I worked 80-hour weeks. I climbed the ladder. I built a life that was orderly, quiet, and mine. The Porsche wasn't just a car, it was my trophy. It was the anti-Chris. It was reliable, high performance, and I had earned it without asking anyone for a dime. When I had bought it, Chris had sneered. "Nice car, too bad you look like a soccer mom driving it. You'll probably scratch it in a week." Now he was driving it. I stood in my kitchen, Officer Miller waiting by the door as I gathered my documentation. I wasn't just angry, I was methodically furious. I pulled a file folder from my cabinet. "This," I said, showing Officer Miller the paper, "is the title, in my name only. This is the bill of sale." I pulled up my email on my phone. "This is the email confirmation from the dealership for the GPS tracker installation. And this," I tapped a different app, "is the Dashcam footage." My Dashcam was cloud-enabled. It uploaded footage whenever the car was turned on. I had received a notification 3 hours ago, but because I was on the plane, I hadn't seen it. I clicked play. The video showed the interior of my garage. The garage door opened. Chris walked into the frame. He looked older than his 30 years, puffy face, wearing a stained t-shirt and expensive sneakers that I knew Carol had bought him. He was grinning. "Jackpot," he said, his voice clear on the recording. He walked around the car, running his hand along the fender. Then he pulled a key fob from his pocket, my spare key. "Too easy," he laughed. He got in. The engine roared to life. He revved it, hard and a cold start, which made me wince even watching the video. "Let's see what this B*TCH has under the hood." He peeled out of my driveway, scraping the bottom of the front bumper on the curb, as he exited too fast. Officer Miller watched the video over my shoulder. "That's clear evidence of unauthorized use," he said, his tone serious. "You said he's on probation." "Yes," I said, grabbing my coat. "He got a DUI 2 years ago and a reckless driving charge 6 months ago. He's not supposed to be driving anything without an interlock device, and he certainly isn't supposed to be driving a stolen vehicle." Aunt Carol had called back 3 times while we watched the video. I finally answered. "Jessica," she screamed, "I'm calling the police on you. You're harassing us." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "I'm with the police right now, Carol." You wouldn't dare," she stammered. "He's your blood. He just needs this car for tonight. He has a date. I told you it was an interview, but it's a date with a very wealthy girl, and he needs to impress her. Do you want him to be single and miserable forever? Are you that selfish?" So the story had changed. First, it was an investor. Now it was a date. The lie was fluid, shifting to whatever she thought would manipulate me best. "He's driving a stolen car on a suspended license, Carol," I said, "and I know exactly where he is. He's at that dive bar on 4th Street, the one he got kicked out of last year." "He is not," she yelled. "He is at a 5-star restaurant. The GPS says Auth." "Are wise," I said, "and Officer Miller and I are on our way." "If you ruin this for him," Carol hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "I will make sure everyone in the family knows what a heartless, jealous little witch you are. You have everything, and you won't share a scrap." "I earned everything," I corrected her, "and Chris is about to earn a felony." I hung up and looked at Officer Miller. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded, adjusting his cap. "Let's go get your car, ma'am." I decided to ride in the front seat of my rental car, following Officer Miller's cruiser, rather than riding with him. I needed the separation. I needed the silence to think, to strategize, and to prepare for the war that was about to erupt in a dive bar parking lot. The drive to the Rusty Anchor, the bar where the GPS dot was pulsating, took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of my phone buzzing incessantly on the passenger seat. "Buzz, Aunt Carol, you are making a huge mistake." "Buzz, Aunt Carol, call off the cops. We can settle this like family. I'll pay for the gas." "Buzz, Aunt Carol, if you arrest him, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead." I glanced at the messages, my expression hardening in the rearview mirror. Dead to us. It was an empty threat. I had been dead to them the moment I stopped being their ATM and their doormat. They just hadn't held the funeral yet. I wasn't just relying on the GPS. As I drove, I activated the remote diagnostics on my phone. The app gave me a terrifying amount of data. Fuel level, 65%. Tire pressure, front right low warning. Max speed recorded in last trip, 104 mph. My stomach lurched. He had taken my precision-engineered machine, a car that I treated with the reverence of a museum curator, and he had driven it at over 100 miles per hour on surface streets. This wasn't just borrowing to impress a date. This was recklessness bordering on a death wish. I picked up the phone and dialed Officer Miller's direct line. He had given me his card before getting back in his cruiser. "Miller," he answered. "Officer, it's Jessica. I'm looking at the telematics from the car right now," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking of my hands on the steering wheel. "He hit 104 miles per hour 10 minutes ago, and the tire pressure sensor is triggered. He might have hit a curb or a pothole at speed." "Copy that," Miller said, his tone shifting from polite to professional alertness. "That upgrades the situation. We aren't just looking at unauthorized use, we're looking at reckless endangerment and potential destruction of property. Is he still stationary?" "Yes, the GPS hasn't moved in 8 minutes. He's at the anchor." "Stay in your vehicle when we arrive until I clear the scene," Miller instructed. "If he's intoxicated or if he has friends with him, I don't want you in the crossfire." "Understood," I said, but I knew I wasn't staying in the car. I needed to see the damage. I needed him to see me seeing it. We turned off the main road onto a gravel-strewn street, lined with warehouses and flickering streetlights. The rusty anchor sat at the end, a squat brick building with a neon sign that buzzed audibly even from the street. And there it was. My Porsche, my beautiful deep blue Porsche Macan. It was parked crookedly across two spaces, the front bumper jutting out aggressively. Even from 50 feet away, under the sickly yellow glow of the parking lot lights, I could see it. The front right rim, my custom matte alloy rim, was scraped to hell, looking like it had been chewed by a metal grinder. The pristine paint on the bumper was marred with white streaks where he had likely clipped a wall or a barrier. I pulled the rental car into a spot 3 rows away, killed the engine, and stepped out before Officer Miller could tell me not to. The night air smelled of stale beer and exhaust. My heart was breaking, but beneath the heartbreak, a cold, steel resolve clamped down. I took a photo of the car from where I stood. Then I zoomed in and took a photo of the rim. I walked toward Officer Miller, who was standing by his door, hand resting near his belt, assessing the vehicle. "That's it?" he asked, nodding at the Porsche. "That's it," I said, pointing to the damage. "He destroyed the rim. That's a $2,000 wheel." "Engine is still hot," Miller noted, walking by the hood. "He hasn't been inside long." I looked at the entrance of the bar. The door swung open, spilling loud music and smoke into the parking lot. "Here we go," I whispered. It wasn't just Chris who walked out, it was an entourage. Chris pushed the door open, laughing loudly, flanked by 2 guys I didn't recognize, scruffy, wearing oversized hoodies, and a woman who looked bored, scrolling on her phone. Chris was holding a set of keys, my keys. He was twirling them around his finger like a gunslinger. He looked exactly as Aunt Carol described him, like a man who thought he had won. He was wearing a suit. Jacket that was too tight in the shoulders, paired with jeans and the sneakers Carol had bought him. He looked like a budget version of a tech CEO, exactly the image he was trying to fake. He didn't see me at first. He didn't even see the police cruiser, which was parked in the shadows of the building's overhang. "Yo, watch this," I heard him say to the woman. 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds. I'm telling you, the suspension is sick." He pointed the fob at the car to unlock it. The lights flashed. "Chris," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the parking lot chatter like a knife. He froze, his arm dropped. He squinted into the darkness, and then his eyes locked on me. For a second, just a split second, I saw terror. Pure, unadulterated panic. But then, as his brain processed that his friends were watching, the mask slammed back into place. He puffed out his chest, fixed a smirk on his face, and took a step toward me. "Jess," he called out, spreading his arms wide as if welcoming me to a party I wasn't invited to. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Chicago boring everyone to death with spreadsheets." The audacity was breathtaking. He was leaning against the car he had stolen, acting like I was the intruder. "I came for my car, Chris," I said, walking until I was 10 feet away. I stopped, crossing my arms. "The one you stole." The bored woman looked up from her phone. "Stole?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Relax, babe," Chris said to her, waving a dismissive hand at me. "My cousin is a drama queen. She let me borrow it. She just has memory issues. Early onset, you know." He looked at me, his eyes narrowing with a warning. "Go home, Jess. Mom said it was cool. I'll bring it back tomorrow. I'm just showing my friends the new whip." "The new whip?" I repeated, my voice dripping with ice. "It's not yours, Chris, and Aunt Carol didn't have the right to give it to you because she stole the key from my house." "You selfish *TCH, he spat, dropping the charm instantly. "You have everything. You make more in a month than I make in a year. You can't let family shine for one night. You have to embarrass me in front of Vanessa." "I don't care about Vanessa," I said, glancing at the woman who was now backing away slowly. "I care about the fact that you are currently on probation for reckless driving. I care that you are legally required to have an ignition interlock device in any vehicle you operate. Does this Porsche have a breathalyzer, Chris?" Chris's face went pale, the smirk vanished. You don't know what you're talking about." I know that your license is suspended, I continued, stepping closer, fueled by the adrenaline. I know that driving this car is a violation of your parole, and I know that you were doing 104 miles per hour on Route 9, which I have on dashcam footage. You're bluffing, he sneered, though his voice wavered. You wouldn't call the cops on family. Mom would kill you. I didn't just call them, I said, nodding toward the shadows. I brought them. Officer Miller stepped out from the darkness, the light from the bar sign catching the badge on his chest. He didn't draw his weapon, but his hand was resting on his belt, his stance imposing. Christopher Higgins, Miller asked, his voice booming. Chris stumbled back, dropping the keys. They clattered on the asphalt. I didn't steal it, Chris stammered, his hands going up instinctively. My mom gave it to me. It's a misunderstanding. Officer, she's crazy. She's trying to frame me. The vehicle is reported stolen, Miller said, walking over and picking up my keys. He bagged them as evidence. And I have reason to believe you are operating it with a suspended license. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle. No, wait, Chris screamed, looking around for an escape route. His friends had already vanished, disappearing around the corner of the building. He was alone. Just as Officer Miller reached for his cuffs, tires screeched behind us. A beat-up Honda Odyssey swerved into the parking lot, hopping the curb and nearly hitting my rental car. The driver's door flew open before the van even came to a full stop. Aunt Carol. Stop, Carol shrieked, sprinting across the parking lot in her bathrobe and slippers. She must have driven like a maniac the moment I hung up on her. Don't you touch him. Do not touch him, my son. She threw herself between Officer Miller and Chris, panting heavily, her hair wild and her face red with exertion. Ma'am, step back, Officer Miller warned, his patience visibly thinning. You are interfering with a police investigation. He didn't steal it, Carol yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. I gave him permission. I am her aunt. I have power of attorney. No, you don't, I said, stepping forward. You haven't had power of attorney since I was 18, Carol, and even if you did, that doesn't give you the right to break into my home. Use and steal my property. It wasn't breaking in, she argued, turning to the officer, her eyes wide and desperate. I had a key. She gave me a key years ago. That implies consent to enter, and if I can enter, I can borrow things. It's implied usage rights. She was throwing out legal-sounding terms she had probably heard on daytime TV, hoping to confuse the situation. Ma'am, Miller said firmly, did the owner of the vehicle, Jessica, explicitly tell you that Christopher could take this specific car tonight? Well, not in so many words, Carol stammered. But family helps family. Look at her. Look at how she's dressed. She has money to burn. Chris has nothing. He just needed a boost. Why is that a crime? Why is kindness a crime? Theft is a crime, Miller corrected her. And enabling a driver with a suspended license to operate a high-performance vehicle is also a crime. You are admitting to facilitating this. I didn't know his license was suspended, she lied. Yes, you did, I cut in. You paid his bail, Carol. I saw the Venmo request you accidentally sent me asking for bail money 6 months ago before you deleted it. Chris, emboldened by his mother's presence, tried to puff himself up again. See? She tracks everything. She's a stalker. She's obsessed with me. I'm obsessed with protecting my life from you parasites, I snapped. Officer, I said, pulling out my phone, I want to play you something. This is the audio from the dashcam when Chris first entered the vehicle in my garage. I turned the volume to max and held it up. The silence of the parking lot amplified the sound. Audio, Chris, jackpot. Chris, Mom said the BTCH is in Chicago until Friday. I can probably strip the rims and swap them before she gets back. She won't even notice. Chris, laughing, let's see what this BTCH has under the hood. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy. Carol's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Chris looked at his shoes. Strip the rims? I asked, my voice trembling with rage. You weren't borrowing it for a date, you were going to sell parts of it. I was joking, Chris yelled. It was a joke. It doesn't sound like a joke, Officer Miller said. He shone his flashlight into the passenger window of the Porsche. The beam cut through the tint. Well, Miller said, leaning in closer to the glass, that's going to be a problem. What? Carol asked, panic rising in her voice. Open container, Miller said. Bottle of tequila on the passenger seat. Cap is off, half empty. Chris froze. And, Miller continued, moving the light to the center console, I see what looks like a baggie of white powder on the dashboard. My jaw dropped. I knew Chris was a mess, but I didn't know he was this deep in the hole. That's not mine, Chris screamed immediately. She planted it. Jessica planted it to frame me. I've been in Chicago, I said calmly, and the car has been in your possession for 4 hours. The timestamps on the camera don't lie, Chris. Carol grabbed Chris's arm. Run, baby, just run, I'll block them. Ma'am, Miller shouted, his hand dropping to his taser. Do not move, stay where you are. He's a good boy, Carol wailed, tears streaming down her face, transforming from aggressive defender to professional victim in seconds. He just has anxiety, he self-medicates. Jessica, please, don't let them take him. He'll go to prison this time, it's a violation. They'll revoke his probation. He should have thought about that before he called me a B*TCH and stole my car to sell the rims, I said, feeling absolutely nothing for her tears. I had cried enough tears for them over the years. I was dry. Officer Miller, I said clearly, I want to press charges for the theft, for the damages, and I want it noted that my aunt provided the means for the theft. You ungrateful little brat. Carol lunged at me, her fingers curled into claws. Officer Miller was faster. He stepped in, intercepting her with a firm arm bar, pushing her back against the Honda. That is enough, Miller barked. He turned to Chris. Turn around now, you are under arrest. Chris looked at his mother, then at me. For the first time in his life, there was no safety net. There was no bail money that could fix a felony probation violation caught on 4K video. I hate you, Chris whispered at me as Miller grabbed his wrists. I hope you die in that car. At least it's my car, I replied, watching the handcuffs click into place. And I paid for it. The police lights faded into the distance, taking Chris and my car, which had to be impounded for evidence processing, away from the rusty anchor. But if I thought the arrest was the end of the battle, I was woefully naive. It was merely the opening salvo of a much uglier war, the war for the family narrative. By the time I woke up the next morning in my too-quiet house, the campaign against me had already begun. My phone had 47 unread messages, not from Carol, but from cousins, uncles, and even my grandmother. How could you do this to family? Carol says you planted drugs on him. I didn't think you were capable of that evil. Drop the charges, Jessica. He's just a boy. Carol had been busy. She had spun a tale so twisted that I barely recognized the events of the previous night. According to the version she was peddling to the family group chat, Chris had found my car unlocked and was driving it back to me for safekeeping when I ambushed him with a corrupt cop and framed him with a bag of baking soda. I stared at the ceiling, the familiar burn of injustice rising in my throat. I could just block them. I could walk away, let the courts handle Chris, and cut ties. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. If I stayed silent, Carol would remain the victim, the martyr mother fighting the cold, corporate witch of a niece. They needed to see the truth. Not hear it from me, because they wouldn't believe me, but see it. I sent one text to the family group chat. I will not be discussing this over text. Grandma's house. Sunday dinner. 6:00 p.m. If you want the truth, be there. If you don't show up, don't ever contact me again. Sunday arrived with a tension so thick it felt like humidity. I walked into my grandmother's house carrying my laptop and a portable projector. The smell of pot roast, usually a comfort, made my stomach turn. The living room was packed. My uncles sat on the couches, arms crossed. My cousins stood by the walls, looking at their phones. And there, in the center, sat Aunt Carol. She looked haggard, wearing no makeup, clutching a tissue. She was playing the part of the grieving mother to perfection. "You have some nerve showing your face," Uncle Mike spat as I set my equipment on the coffee table. "After what you did to that boy." "What I did?" I asked, my voice calm as I plugged the HDMI cable in. "Or what he did to himself." "He's in jail, Jessica," Carol wailed, dabbing her dry eyes. "They denied bail because of your lies. He's in a cage with animals because you couldn't just share your precious car." "It wasn't about sharing, Carol," I said, booting up the laptop. "And it wasn't about borrowing." I projected my screen onto the blank cream wall above the fireplace. The room went silent as the stark black-and-white footage of my garage appeared. "This is Tuesday night," I said. "Watch." I played the video. They watched Chris enter. They watched him steal the key. But more importantly, I had enhanced the audio. The room filled with Chris's voice, clear and mocking. "Mom said the BTCH is in Chicago until Friday. I can probably strip the rims and swap them before she gets back. She won't even notice." A ripple of unease went through the room. Uncle Mike uncrossed his arms. "He was joking," Carol snapped, though her voice lacked its usual venom. "Boys talk like that." "Do they?" I asked. "Let's look at the text messages recovered from his phone. The police were kind enough to share the evidence log with me since it pertains to the destruction of my property." I clicked to the next slide. It was a screenshot of a text conversation between Chris and a contact named Scrapyard Sal. "Chris got a Mackin, rims are clean. What can you give me? Sal, 400 apiece if you get them to me by midnight. Chris, done, easy money." The silence in the room changed. It shifted from hostile to horrified. "He wasn't impressing a girl, Carol," I said, looking directly at her. "He was selling parts of my car for drug money, which brings me to the next exhibit." I pulled up the police report. 0.5 grams of cocaine found in the center console. Open bottle of tequila. Blood alcohol level of 0.14. He was driving my $70,000 car, drunk and high, while on probation. Carol stood up, her face turning a blotchy red. "That's a lie, you put that there." "And the text messages to the scrapyard," I countered. "Did I plant those too? Did I hack his phone while I was on a plane over Lake Michigan?" I turned to my grandmother, the matriarch, who had been sitting quietly in her armchair throughout the presentation. She was looking at the screen, then at Carol. "You told us," Grandma said, her voice shaking with age and anger, "that Jessica gave him the keys. You told us she was lying about the theft." "She is," Carol insisted, but she was shrinking. She entrapped him." "Carol," Grandma said sharply, "shut up." The command cracked like a whip. Carol froze. "I have given you money for his rent," Grandma continued, her hands gripping the armrests. "I have paid for his lawyers. I have paid for his rehab that he never went to, and you told me he was turning his life around. You told me Jessica was the problem." "She is," Carol squeaked. "Look at the screen, Carol," Uncle Mike shouted, finally standing up. He was stripping her car. He called her a B*TCH, after everything she's done for this family. I stood there, feeling the tide turn. It wasn't a wave of warmth, it was the cold realization of facts. "I'm not dropping the charges," I announced to the room. "Chris is going to prison. He violated his probation, he committed grand theft, auto, DUI, and possession. He did this to himself. And Carol." I pointed the remote at her. "You admitted on the police body cam that you took my key. Officer Miller is filing charges against you for accessory to theft and burglary. You're not just looking at a lawsuit, Carol. You're looking at jail time." Carol looked around the room for support, for someone to save her, to tell her that family came first. But the faces she saw, her brothers, her mother, her nieces, were turned away. The spell was broken. The toxicity she had cultivated for decades had finally been exposed to the sunlight, and it withered instantly. She slumped back onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, sobbing. This time, nobody moved to comfort her. The legal fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely necessary. Because Chris was already on probation, the system had no mercy left for him. My dashcam footage, combined with the body cam footage of his arrest and the narcotics found in the car, painted a picture of a man who refused to be rehabilitated. His public defender tried to argue for another stint in rehab, citing affluenza and family pressure, but the judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen enough men like Chris, wasn't buying it. Chris was sentenced to 4 years in state prison for the combined charges, plus the remainder of his previous suspended sentence. When the gavel banged, he didn't look at me with anger. He didn't look at me at all. He just looked defeated, a small man in an orange jumpsuit who had finally run out of road. Aunt Carol didn't fare much better. While she avoided prison time by pleading guilty to a lesser charge of trespassing and petty theft, the social and financial cost was catastrophic. She was sentenced to 3 years of probation, community service, and ordered to pay restitution for the damages to my car that Chris couldn't cover. The family, for the first time in my life, enforced consequences. Grandma cut Carol off financially. No more loans, no more bailouts. Uncle Mike told her she wasn't welcome at Sunday dinners until she sought therapy and made a genuine apology. Last I heard, she was working as a cashier at a grocery store, her first real job in 20 years, trying to pay off her legal fees. As for the Porsche, it took 3 weeks in the shop. The rim had to be replaced, the suspension realigned, and the interior professionally detailed to remove the smell of tequila and whatever cheap cologne Chris had bathed in. The bill was eye-watering, nearly $6,000. Carol's restitution payments were coming in at $50 a month, so I paid the bulk of it myself. But the money didn't matter. The day I picked it up from the shop was a crisp autumn afternoon. The mechanic, a guy named Dave who had been sympathetic throughout the ordeal, walked me around the vehicle. "Good as new, Jessica," he said, handing me the keys. "We even buffed out that scratch on the bumper." I took the keys, the new keys, recoded so the old stolen fob was now a useless piece of plastic. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door. The silence of the cabin wrapped around me like a shield. I ran my hands over the leather steering wheel. It felt mine again. I didn't drive straight home. I drove out to the coast, taking the winding roads that hugged the cliffs. I pushed the car, feeling the grip of the tires, the surge of the engine, the precision of the engineering. It responded instantly to my touch, powerful and obedient. I pulled over at a scenic overlook and watched the sun dip below the horizon. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grandma. "I'm proud of you, honey, not for the car, but for standing up. Come over for tea this weekend, just us." I smiled, a genuine, deep-seated release of tension that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The reconciliation I had needed wasn't with Chris or Carol. They were weeds in the garden of my life, and I had finally pulled them out. The reconciliation was with the rest of my family, who had finally woken up, and more importantly, with myself. I had stopped being the victim. I had stopped being the quiet cousin. I was the woman who fought back. I was the woman who won. I put the car in gear, the engine purring a low, satisfied growl, and drove home. The driveway was empty when I arrived, but this time, it wasn't a sign of loss. It was a space waiting to be filled by something that was entirely, undeniably mine.